It was supposed to be an easy win for him, but what happened next left the entire room in shock. A well-known liberal musician smirked as he challenged Pam Bondi to sit at the piano, convinced she would embarrass herself. The crowd chuckled, expecting a disaster. But as she placed her fingers on the keys, everything changed. Was this an attempt at public humiliation gone horribly wrong, or did Bondi just silence her critics in the most unexpected way? What happens when talent speaks louder than mockery? Watch till the end to find out. Before we get started, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's get started. The musician leaned back in his chair, a smug grin playing on his lips. The crowd, a mix of supporters and skeptics, watched with eager anticipation. Cameras flashed and murmurs spread through the room as he cleared his throat and began. Pam, let's be honest. People don't exactly associate you with artistry or creativity. Politics, sure, legal battles, absolutely, but music, that's a whole different world. Why don't you prove to us that you're not just another stiff, out-of-touch bureaucrat? Play something, anything. A ripple of laughter echoed through the audience. The challenge wasn't just about music. It was a thinly veiled attempt at humiliation. He expected hesitation, embarrassment, maybe even an excuse, anything that would validate his assumption that she was out of her depth. But Bondi didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You want me to play?" she said, tilting her head slightly. "That's the idea," he shot back, smirking. "Unless, of course, you'd rather admit that some things are just beyond you." The implication was clear. Politicians weren't artists. Logic-driven minds like hers had no place in the world of music. He was painting her as rigid, unskilled, incapable of creativity. The audience chuckled again, sensing an impending victory for the musician. But instead of reacting emotionally, Bondi remained poised. "You know, it's interesting," she mused. "People often assume that if you excel in one field, you must be hopeless in another. But real skill, real talent isn't always about fitting into labels." She gestured toward the grand piano that sat center stage, waiting. "You challenged me to play? All right." The room grew quieter. The musician's smirk wavered just slightly. This wasn't the reaction he had expected. As Bondi stood and approached the piano, the energy in the room shifted. The challenge had been issued as a joke, but now, something about her confidence made people wonder. She settled onto the bench, placing her fingers gently on the keys. Then, she began to play. A soft melodic intro filled the space. The audience, once buzzing with whispers, fell into an awed silence. Even the musician, who had moments ago been brimming with overconfidence, leaned forward. His smirk had vanished. But that was just the beginning. What happened next changed everything. The final note lingered in the air, hanging like an unspoken challenge. The audience sat in stunned silence, their laughter from earlier now replaced with something entirely different. Respect, admiration, maybe even disbelief. The musician blinked, his confident smirk faltering for just a moment. But he wasn't about to admit defeat. No, this was his stage. He needed to take back control. He leaned forward, forcing a chuckle. All right, that was cute." His voice dripped with condescension. "I didn't expect you to have a little tune memorized. But let's be real, Pam. Playing one rehearsed song doesn't make you a musician. That's like saying reading a law book makes someone a lawyer." The audience tensed. Some people nodded. Perhaps he had a point. Others frowned, sensing the attempt to undermine her. Pam didn't flinch. Instead, she let a small, knowing smile cross her lips. "You're absolutely right," she said, her voice measured and steady. "One song doesn't make me a musician, just like one flashy performance doesn't make someone a true artist." The words landed like a subtle strike. The audience caught the deeper meaning. The musician narrowed his eyes. "Oh, I see what you're trying to do," he said. "Look, I get it. You're used to debating politicians, twisting words, but music? Music is passion. You can't just fake it." He turned back to the audience, shrugging theatrically. "I mean, come on. How much time does a high-powered attorney like Pam Bondi really have to devote to something like this? Probably just a hobby, right? Something picked up for appearances?" The jab was clear. He was painting her as an out-of-touch, privileged figure, someone who dabbled in music without ever truly understanding it. Pam didn't rush to defend herself. Instead, she let the moment breathe, let the audience absorb the weight of his words. Then, she nodded. "You're right again." The musician blinked. That wasn't the response he expected. "I don't have the luxury of dedicating every hour of my day to music," Pam continued. "I didn't grow up playing concert halls or studying under famous composers. But you know what I did do? I worked, I learned, I practiced, I put in effort, just like anyone else who truly respects a craft." She rested her fingers back on the keys. Music isn't just about raw talent. It's about discipline, focus, precision. Funny enough, a lot like law. And with that, she launched into another piece, this time something far more intricate. The tempo was faster, the notes weaving together in a dazzling display of skill. The audience gasped. A few leaned forward. Someone in the back let out a low whistle of appreciation. The musician shifted in his seat, his confidence visibly shaken. This wasn't the reaction he had planned for, but the next move from opponent would be their biggest mistake yet. The musician sat back, rubbing his chin as Pam Bondi's fingers danced effortlessly across the piano keys. The room had shifted. Moments ago he had been the one in control, the one with the upper hand, but now the audience was captivated by her performance, by her skill. He needed to take back control. Fast. With a smirk, he clapped slowly, forcing an air of amusement. "All right, that was impressive. I'll give you that." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "But any trained pianist can memorize a song. Real musicians improvise. They create in the moment. Tell you what, why don't you prove yourself? Play something completely original, right now. No sheet music, no pre-planned tricks." The challenge hung in the air like a guillotine. The audience stirred. Whispers spread through the crowd. "That's impossible," someone muttered. "No way she can pull that off." Pam, however, didn't react with panic. She simply studied the musician, her expression unreadable. The musician crossed his arms. "What's wrong? Thought you were good at this." A few people in the audience chuckled. It seemed like he had her cornered. Then she spoke, calmly, confidently. "You want me to improvise? Fine." She cracked her knuckles and rested her hands on the keys, and then she started playing. But not just random notes, no, this was something else entirely. The melody was bold, fluid, almost conversational. The rhythm shifted unpredictably yet seamlessly, as if she were telling a story through the music itself. The audience watched, mesmerized. Then, Pam did something even more shocking. She incorporated the musician's own style. She mimicked the way he played earlier, weaving in elements of his personal technique. But then she elevated it. She added complexities, flourishes that he hadn't used. It wasn't just improvisation, it was domination. The musician's smirk vanished, his jaw clenched as he realized what had just happened. Pam had flipped his own challenge against him. The room exploded. Gasps, applause, cheers. People turned to one another, shaking their heads in disbelief. The musician's face turned red as he forced a chuckle. But it was clear. He had just been outclassed. And just when everyone thought it was over, Pam dropped a final bombshell. The last notes of Pam Bondi's improvisation still hung in the air, but the impact was immediate. The audience was no longer just entertained. They were stunned. The musician, who moments ago had been so smug, now looked like he had swallowed something sour. He forced a chuckle, shaking his head as if trying to dismiss what had just happened. All right, that was unexpected," he said, waving a hand. "But let's be real here. Anyone can put together a few notes on the spot. That doesn't mean you have a true understanding of music. I mean, can you even read complex sheet music? Play in different time signatures? What about advanced jazz theory? I doubt it." It was a weak attempt to regain control, and the audience could sense it. The murmurs had changed. Before, people were on his side laughing at Pam's supposed lack of skill. But now they were watching him with skepticism. Pam didn't take the bait. She simply leaned back, resting her fingers lightly on the piano keys, and smiled. "You seem a little nervous," she said, her voice light, almost teasing. "That's strange. Just a moment ago you were so confident." The audience chuckled. The musician's jaw tensed. "Nervous? Please. I've played in front of thousands. You think this phases me?" Pam tilted her head. "Then why are you changing the subject?" More murmurs, a shift in the room. The musician scoffed. "I'm not changing the subject. I'm just pointing out that true musicians have depth, not just flashy tricks." Pam nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great point. So let's talk about depth. You challenged me to improvise because you assumed I couldn't do it. I did. Now, you're suddenly concerned about theory instead of talent. Seems to me like you're moving the goalposts." A ripple of oohs ran through the crowd. The musician exhaled sharply. His fingers drummed against the table. His confidence was unraveling, and the audience could see it. Pam turned her gaze toward the audience now, speaking directly to them. "This is what happens when someone underestimates you. They start with insults, then move to impossible challenges, and when that fails, they scramble for an excuse. The problem isn't that I played well, the problem is that I wasn't supposed to." The audience erupted in applause. The musician's face darkened. He was losing them. Desperation crept into his voice. "Oh, come on. You all don't actually think she's a better musician than me, do you?" No one answered. That silence, that was worse than 1,000 insults. But the final moment of truth was still to come. The musician's confidence was gone. His earlier smugness had been replaced by a desperate attempt to regain control. He leaned forward, forcing a smirk, his voice laced with mockery. "Okay, fine. You played a little tune. Cute. But let's be real. One lucky performance doesn't make you a musician. Maybe you rehearsed that little act beforehand. Maybe you just got lucky. But you don't have the real skill, the instinct, the depth that a professional does." He leaned back, crossing his arms as if he had made his final unbeatable point. The audience, however, wasn't laughing with him anymore. Their expressions ranged from unimpressed to outright annoyed. Pam Bondi simply smiled. "Lucky?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "All right then, let's remove luck from the equation." Without another word, she reached into her bag, pulled out a random sheet of complex classical music, and placed it on the piano stand. Gasps rippled through the audience. The musician's smirk flickered. Pam's fingers hovered over the keys for just a moment before she began to play. Flawlessly. The room fell into stunned silence. She wasn't just playing, she was performing. Each note carried emotion, precision, and confidence. Her hands danced effortlessly across the keys, shifting between difficult transitions as if they were nothing. The musician's face drained of color. He had no more excuses. Pam wasn't lucky. She was better. As she played the final note, she turned to face him with a calm, knowing smile. "I didn't rehearse this. You're welcome to pick another piece if you'd like." The audience exploded into cheers. People stood up, clapping, whistling, shouting. Even those who had sided with the musician earlier were now on their feet. The musician sat frozen, mouth slightly open, hands clenched into fists. He had nothing left to say. Pam stood up, gave him a small nod, and walked off. The debate was over. And that's when the real shock came next. The musician sat in silence, his face still frozen in shock. He had spent the entire evening trying to tear Pam Bondi down, confident that she would crumble under the weight of his mockery. But instead she had outplayed, outclassed, and outshined him in front of the entire audience. A few awkward beats passed. The tension in the air was thick. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do next. Would he admit defeat? Offer a backhanded excuse, storm off? Finally, with a forced chuckle, he muttered, "Well, I guess I wasn't expecting that." Pam, ever composed, simply smiled. "I've learned that underestimation is a dangerous habit," she said, addressing both him and the crowd. "Talent, skill, and hard work don't always come with flashy labels, but in the end, intelligence, merit, and truth always rise above arrogance and manipulation." The audience erupted into applause once again. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice called, "Out. Now that's how you handle a challenge." The musician, now visibly humbled, nodded slightly before retreating into the background. His voice had dominated the conversation at first, but now, it was nothing more than a footnote in Pam's victory. This wasn't just about music. It was about judgment, arrogance, and the power of quiet confidence. In a world where loud voices often try to drown out the truth, real skill and wisdom always find a way to shine through. Do you think justice was served? Let us know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated and proved someone wrong? Share your story. If you believe in standing up for truth and talent, share this video and let's remind the world. Real skill always wins.